Thanks, Alison, for that fantastic speech. My name's Rachel Wearmouth. I'm going to be asking Alison a few questions before opening it up to the floor, so you can all ask her questions as well. I think probably a good place to start, actually, would be a little bit more about yourself. You talked there about how social mobility is in reverse. I was wondering if you could tell me a bit about how progressive politics have changed your life. You were born in Merseyside, your mum was a nurse, your dad was a telecoms engineer. Do you want to give us a bit of background on how politics has changed your life?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. Thinking about that speech, I was thinking about being a teenager myself and what life was like in the 1990s. And I think one of the reasons why I sort of like to point out that nostalgia is a bad thing in politics is that we're all prey to it. I think about, those kind of years when I was like 14, 15, 16, 17, 1994, 1995, 1996. I think about that time and I remember that feeling of hopefulness. I was doing my A-levels thinking about, where I might go next. And, I was lucky enough to go to UCL in this city and move to London and experience London in the late 90s and early 2000s. And it was just absolutely a fantastic place to be. I think probably we all, look back at our youth. It would be sad if you didn't look back at your youth in some way feeling hopeful. And I didn't come from a particularly political background in the sense that I'm not related to any politicians. My dad was very active in the what became the RMT in the rail union. He worked on the railways for many years, and my mum, she was a nurse, and then she started her own preschool. So they were both very political. Obviously, my dad's form of politics was like making big speeches at NUR conference, and and my mum's politics was like being very practical, and it's like a gender stereotype that was very true in my case. That my mum's politics was about getting things done for people, and we didn't have enough preschool places in our town, so she and her friends created a preschool, and I watched that happen. And I think that really shaped my view that politics is not just about making speeches, as I have done, but it's also about getting things for people. And then I went to UCL and studied for 3 years and had an incredible insight into this city and managed to kind of get involved with politics here, not actually through student politics, but in my local Labour Party in the best London borough that there is, the London Borough of Southwark. That is like a controversial thing. So there's like people from Lambeth going, it is not, people from Lewisham going, oh, that's all right. So I got involved in politics in Southwark and really loved it. And elections became a great love. And basically I kept turning up at things. And then one day I turned up at a selection in Wirral South and got selected and became a member of Parliament. But my journey into the Labour Party was really through campaigning and, friends of mine saying, oh, going out door knocking, do you want to come? And he's like, yeah. And then the first time you kind of knock on someone's door and you're able to talk to them about politics and you realise the stuff you read in the newspapers is a lot less interesting than those conversations that you have on doorsteps. Sometimes, not all the time, sorry, journalists. But you realise, oh, this is like real politics. And I just got absolutely captured by it.
So you are now the Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions.
Acting. Liz Kendall's having a hip done. That's why I'm acting.
And you've said that the department has lost its purpose and that you are obsessed with job centres, which, all members of Parliament perhaps should be obsessed with job centres but are not. But I wondered if you could kind of give people a bit of perspective on how you would like a job centre to feel should Labour have been in power for a few years. How will that experience change for those people who need the service? Or indeed somebody who is looking forward to the rest of their career and wants to go to a job centre to find out what to do next? What will change for them?
So I'm tempted to talk about all the really straightforward, basic things, like making welcoming spaces is really important when people are coming to talk about a thing that has made them vulnerable. And I think, anybody been to a job centre recently? Any thoughts? Shout out. Audience participation. Okay, nobody wants to check. Grim, was that?
Dingy.
Yeah. Yeah, so the Friday phone call of like, do this, do that. So, yeah, exactly. So basically, I ask that question a lot of rooms like this, and the reaction is often very similar. Most people haven't been to one or have had no experience of one, which I think speaks volumes. And then people sort of heads go down and say, oh, it's just like, it made me feel really rubbish. So I think the difference that we need to make is welcoming environment. There's often a security guard right on the door, and while security is very important, you know, I think that there's more that we can do to help people feel welcome. So it's tempting for me to describe all of those sorts of immediate things. But actually, the reason why I say the ethos needs to change and, you know, we need to have ambition for people is because it's not about the small, simple things like having a more welcoming environment, you know, having light buildings. Last Labour government did great things when it created Job Centre Plus in making an environment that felt relaxing and a place you wanted to be and talk. But rather, I think the big thing that's got to change is about what our ambition is for people who are having some life change or something's happened to them. So they're going to a job centre to get advice, they're going to get support, thinking about what they could be, not, you know, all of the bad things that have happened to them, and then the state says, and here's a set of rules. There will always be rules in social security. That's how it works. You contribute, and it's there for you when you need it. But I think job centres can be a place where people get genuine advice. As I was saying, we want to create new jobs, so we want to have genuine good advice so that people have half a chance of getting those new jobs. And we want people to be able to explore their ambitions and their opportunities. One of the big areas for development is thinking about disabled people, where, you know, we want the disabled people's employment to grow. If we're going to do that, we're going to need to be a lot better at mediating between employers and disabled people, because there's huge amounts of discrimination. So we've got to support people and deal with that challenge in a much better way. So I would say there's things that we could do immediately, big ambition on ethos, and also my final point is think creatively, because when it comes to job centres and employment support more broadly, like DWP is very standalone, whereas what we want is to have DWP as a partner for other bits of the state. So Liz Kendall has done a lot of work with colleagues in health to figure out how do you make employment support part of someone's treatment pathway. So if you've got a mental health condition and you're having treatment for that, how do we make sure that you're getting advice about what's going on for you at work at an early stage and as it goes on? So we keep people in work, and if people have had to leave work because they've had an experience being unwell, that we figure out how to make the work support their health, not put it at risk. So it's not such a big barrier between work and the things that you're trying to do to get yourself to be well. And I could talk about this honestly for about 3 hours uninterrupted, so you should probably...
I was going to move on to talk
haven't even mentioned working with FE colleges yet. I mean, we could go on, but carry on.
Okay, I was going to mention in the first instance, you kind of touched on it in your speech there, the kind of rise that we're seeing in people not in employment, education or training, these young people. And obviously that there's a risk that this kind of trend will affect them for the rest of their lives. What are the most important interventions you can make to ensure that somebody enters the labour market at a younger age?
So we have a lot of evidence and research on this, and you are absolutely right that basically if you have a period of unemployment at the beginning of your career, the financial effect of that stays with you throughout your entire life. So therefore, I think it's completely rational for any government to want to take extra steps to prevent that happening. So colleges. One of the most important changes we can make is to create, as you know, Bridget has put forward, a much better system of FE colleges of technical excellence, where we can make sure that we understand for any town, any city, any place, what is the future of this economy? Where are the new jobs coming in from? When we're investing in our green economy, what qualifications do people need for those jobs? And make sure that the pathways are there through colleges for young people. So, as Liz said, in a fantastic speech that she gave on this. There's just no option to end up on a life of benefits because we've got a pathway there for young people. I think as well as making sure that people have got the skills, because often what will happen is if school doesn't work out for somebody, then there's not enough of a second chance, and that's what we've got to fix. The other thing that can happen, and I mentioned the pandemic generation, is that people have experienced real trauma and that mental health need is simply not being dealt with. Oh, I've just dropped my phone on the floor, never mind. So that we've got a big need. And so obviously Liz and I are also working very closely with Wes's team in the Shadow Health team, with Abeno Pangasere, who leads on this for us, and with Luciana Berger, who's reviewing our mental health plans to make sure that in every town we've got open access mental health support for young people. If you combine that with the right employment support and knowledge of where the jobs are, then you can get a virtuous circle. So improving young people's mental health, helping them into some of the social experiences that young people have really missed out on, and then taking that as your starting point for what work and a career should look like. Sorry.
Well, that's okay. One of the things that you mentioned in your speech, I'd never heard a Labour politician say this recently, is you mentioned a national nostalgia as one of the things that maybe holding us back. Could you expand on what you meant by that?
I mean, I think I've had a go at nostalgia at almost every Progress conference and Progressive Britain conference in the past 10 years. So I think there's always a wasn't it better when culture. This is my, I experience it myself. I think, there was no time for music like 1995. We all do it. But what we really mean is, I liked it when I was young. And nostalgia is a seductive liar. Of course it wasn't the case that things were better in the 1990s. Gay people couldn't get married. Women had far fewer, Fiona McTaggart is here. Fiona and her generation of Labour women gave my generation of Labour women a platform on which to stand, to use Neil Kinnock's expression. When I entered Parliament, thank you, yeah. When I entered Parliament in 2010, I walked into a women's PLP that had intellectual resource, that was organised, that was determined. That was far better than what Harriet's generation of very few women, and even better than your generation of Labour women, Fiona, going in at that point when I was young in the late 90s. So nostalgia is a seductive liar. Progressives think that if we embrace the future with our values, bring our values to the future, that is the best hope we have of change. And I think it's important always to remember that we have our eyes front, we look forward. We don't think that there was some mythical past that we can hark back to that was somehow better. And I think you can point to the failures in British politics, down the years of when nostalgia has taken over, and it's always, always a false prospectus.
Okay, you mentioned as well in your speech a pretty astounding stat. Was it 1 in 4 people once in low pay struggle to escape?
1 in 6.
1 in 6, still
so
that's huge.
Conservative peer Ruby McGregor-Smith conducted a review of in-work pay progression for the Conservative government in 2021, and that's her research.
Okay.
So it's like the government's own review found that.
How do you? What's the most effective thing you can do to help them escape low pay if they're on that path?
Well, 2 things, by and large, in our country's history get people a pay rise: the law and a trade union membership card in your back pocket. So we work on both of them. We strengthen the law on the minimum wage, as Rachel and Angela Rayner set out, making sure it really, deals with cost of living in a proper way. And Rachel's also, talked, I think, compellingly about dealing with gender pay gaps and other things. And as I set out, New Deal for working people. Particularly, I think of the 300,000 social care workers in this country doing one of the hardest, most highly skilled jobs on some of the poorest pay rates. So getting that fair pay agreement for social care workers so that they've got a chance of moving up. It's a profession, being a care worker. More people are doing more complicated aspects of the job, giving medicines, looking after older, more unwell people, and they deserve that pay progression. So let's have a shape of that kind of employment so that we know we've got the right contracts and the right framework in place so that people over time are going to do better. So yeah, the law and trade union membership, that is the...
And I think businesses have a role to play as well, I guess you would say. When you think about things like we have a super deduction for new equipment, but not for staff training, for example, is that's something that you'd like to start to see change?
I think businesses can definitely do a lot, but I sort of like listen to the businesses who are already doing some of this, and I think that, you know, we can change the apprenticeship levy so it works better for business. I think also we should like listen to the experience of business. For example, often the kind of employment support that people get at the moment is things like CV writing courses. Businesses, many of them, don't even ask for CVs when they recruit anymore because they're looking for people's skills, not the school they went to and their background. So I think government is missing what's happening in our economy, which is that the best businesses are thinking about progression, and they're thinking about, you know, the skills that people come to them with, and developing that and giving them that journey. So I think businesses are actually already doing a lot, and we should listen to the better businesses.
Okay, I would like to open it up to a couple of questions at this point. So I don't know if anybody would like to ask Alison a question. Oh, yes, please. We've got... Yeah.
Great. Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Alison, just to pick up on your point about the DWP Job Centre Plus need to be more about jobs and less about benefits and sanctions. I'll highlight a programme I worked on in the early noughties called the Front Office Shared Services, where councils led on projects to bring together a number of local public sector partners, DWP, health, etc., into a centre. So Bunny Hill was one in Sunderland, Kent Gateway was another one in all the Kent councils, where they brought those wraparound services that could help people get into jobs and get the support and other benefits that they may need. Obviously, that's been impacted by austerity right across the public sector, but this has been done before, and it would be good to kind of maybe not necessarily reinvent the wheel, but go back and learn from that.
Right.
Should we take another two, if possible, at the same time? For anybody, there's a gentleman behind you, and there's a lady over here as well.
Thank you. My name is Nathan Jones. I'm from the National Care Forum, so we're a membership body representing not-for-profit care and support providers. And I just want to thank you for what you said about the wages of social care workers and the need for fair pay. Sort of my question comes maybe about how we go about doing that. Because if we just set fair pay without putting the investment in the system that needs to be there, we're going to be in exactly the same place we are now. The bulk of adult social care is funded through public contracts, which are severely underfunded. We're going to have to do something about that. We're going to have to think about how commissioning works, so it isn't about a race to the bottom in terms of prices, but it's about outcomes for people. And we're really going to need to think about the sorts of organisations that are getting public funding. So how do we take a lot of the more negative for-profit focus out of care, which shouldn't be there?
Oh, she's already catered for. So we'll beat you to it.
Thank you, Anna Dixon, parliamentary candidate for Shipley constituency. Brilliant to hear, Alison, you talking about the reform of Job Centre. I've done a lot of work about the barriers to older workers getting back into the job market and staying in the job market. Main reason, obviously, is health conditions, managing those. So, as well as reforming that side, you touched on the need for employers and the labour market itself to change. And I just wondered what policies you might be thinking about, or we might be thinking about as a party, around how do we get good jobs, by which I mean not just the paying conditions, but good jobs that actually support people with health conditions and disability, and that working with employers, because I think that's the big gap.
Yeah.
There just aren't the good jobs to support people in work.
okay, are you okay to take
Yeah,
those
it's so exciting because I think I'm the only one who cares about job centres, and then I come to an event like this and it's like, we're all here, we're caring about job centres. I just want to talk in response to the two first points that were made about not reinventing the wheel, because I think there are a lot of good examples of where we do this better already. And one of the things, if I was Minister for Employment tomorrow, if the British people were kind enough to make that happen, the thing that I would do would be to work with local authorities and devolved organisations. I mean, we're already talking a lot to Greater Manchester, to Merseyside, to colleagues, in all of the London boroughs about what they're doing already. Because the failure of job centres has meant that a lot of organisations have created projects and other organisations to help support people with employment challenges outside of that system. So what I would be doing would be exactly that, saying, okay, what have we got already that can already work? And yeah, I won't be tempted to write our manifesto on care here on stage, not least because I'd get into trouble. So, but it's extremely important, and I hope that you kind of get from what I've said, that's what I think. And I think you, sorry, I didn't quite catch your name, the person who said it, but I felt you really spelled out actually some of the avenues that we really need to look down there on commissioning and so on. And just finally, on how do we make this better and how do we get the job matching better? I think people often forget why we have job centres at all. And they come from labour exchanges, which were created as part of the Beveridge, Eleanor Rathbone movement to deal with dreadful working conditions at the turn of the 19th, 20th century, where Rathbone, in my own city in Liverpool, investigated what was going on the Liverpool docks and in industry for poor people. And she found all of these people who were not able to get a decent job because they were crowding round on the dockside. And their great insight was that if people only had good information and they knew where good work could be found, that they could have a better life and a better quality of life for their family. And Beveridge wrote Unemployment, a Problem of Industry, because his insight was that unemployment wasn't sort of like a moral failing or question, it was a problem for our economy and for our industry. And that if you enable business to get the workers that it needs and workers to get the best jobs that they need, you can deal with the informational imbalance that people are really suffering from. And I think that insight is important. Scope, the disabled people's charity, has their own employment service outside of DWP. Why? Because they needed to provide precisely the thing that you were talking about, where you discuss with employers what good work looks like for a disabled person, and you help that disabled person into that job in a way that is mediated and much more likely to be successful, and not make that person have a bad experience and then be completely back to square one. So if I was given the opportunity to change things tomorrow, I would be learning that lesson.
Unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. So I'd just like to thank Alison for speaking today and for answering all of your questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to more.
Sorry, I went on.